She was supposed to walk down the aisle toward her new beginning. Instead, she ran for her life. On a perfect June afternoon in suburban Virginia, amid white roses and champagne toasts, a woman's past came crashing through the garden gates with a loaded weapon and 214 days of calculated rage. What happened next wasn't just a crime. It was the devastating conclusion to a love story that should have ended years earlier. And the most terrifying part? Every single warning sign was there. Every red flag was waving. But like so many before her, she believed love could change him. She believed he would let her go. She was wrong. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This is the true story of Sarah Mitchell, a 28-year-old elementary school teacher whose wedding day became a crime scene. And the man who turned it into one? Someone she once promised to love forever. Sarah grew up in Richmond, the youngest of three daughters in a tight-knit family. Her mother taught piano. Her father managed a hardware store. She was the kind of girl who brought home stray cats and cried during sad commercials. Her sisters describe her as sensitive, trusting, maybe too trusting. After college, she moved to Arlington to teach second grade. She loved her job, loved her students, loved the idea of building a quiet, meaningful life. She wasn't looking for drama. She wasn't looking for intensity. But that's exactly what found her. His name was Derek Cole. They met at a mutual friend's barbecue in the summer of 2019. He was charming, attentive, quick with compliments. He worked in IT, drove a clean car, and knew how to make her laugh. For the first few months, everything felt easy. He brought her coffee before work. He remembered the names of her students. He texted her good morning every single day. Her friends liked him. Her family liked him. Sarah felt like she'd finally found someone solid, someone real. But slowly, so slowly, she didn't even notice at first, things began to change. It started with small questions. Where are you? Who are you with? Why didn't you text me back? At first, Sarah thought it was sweet. He cares, she told herself. He just wants to know I'm safe. But the questions became more frequent, more pointed. He started showing up unannounced at her apartment, at the school, at her sister's house. When she went out with friends, he'd call repeatedly until she answered. When she didn't respond fast enough, he'd accuse her of hiding something. The sweetness curdled into suspicion. The attention twisted into control. One night, about 8 months into the relationship, they had their first real fight. Sarah had gone to dinner with a coworker, a man, someone from her teaching team. It was innocent, professional. But when Derek found out, he lost it. He screamed at her in the parking lot of her apartment complex, called her a liar, accused her of cheating. She was stunned, terrified. When she tried to walk away, he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave a bruise. The next morning, he showed up with flowers and tears. He apologized over and over, said he didn't know what came over him, said he loved her too much, said it would never happen again. And Sarah, because she loved him, because she wanted to believe him, forgave him. But it did happen again and again. The cycle became predictable. Explosion, apology, honeymoon phase, tension building, explosion. Sarah started walking on eggshells, started monitoring her own behavior, started canceling plans with friends to avoid conflict. Her mother noticed she seemed tired. Her coworkers noticed she seemed distant. But Sarah kept insisting everything was fine. Because admitting it wasn't fine meant admitting she'd made a mistake, and she wasn't ready to do that yet. The breaking point came in March of 2021. Derek went through her phone while she was sleeping. He found a text from a male friend, someone she'd known since high school, someone who'd sent her a joke. Derek woke her up at 2 a.m., screaming, waving the phone in her face. He smashed it against the wall. Then he locked the bedroom door and wouldn't let her leave until she explained herself. Sarah spent 3 hours trying to calm him down, trying to reason with him, trying not to cry. When he finally let her out, she drove straight to her sister's house. She didn't go back. If this part is making sense, drop a comment with "I am still here." Let us see who is following this story closely. Breaking up with Derek was the hardest thing Sarah had ever done. Not because she still loved him, though part of her did, but because she was terrified of what he'd do, and her fear was justified. Within days, Derek started calling from different numbers. He created fake social media accounts to message her. He sent long emails, some apologetic, some angry, some chillingly detailed about how much he knew about her daily routine. He showed up at her school. Twice, security had to escort him off the property. Sarah filed for a restraining order. It was granted. Derek was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from her. For a few weeks, things were quiet. Sarah started to breathe again. Then she met James Carter. He was everything Derek wasn't. Calm, steady, respectful. He was a firefighter, divorced, no kids, looking for something real. They met through a dating app, and their first date lasted 5 hours. Sarah felt safe with him. She told him about Derek early on, not to scare him, but because she needed him to understand why she was cautious. James didn't run. He listened. He supported her. He encouraged her to keep the restraining order active. 6 months later, they were engaged. Sarah felt like she was finally moving forward. The wedding was planned for June 18th, 2022, at a small garden venue in Fairfax. 80 guests, outdoor ceremony, string quartet. Sarah's students made decorations. Her sisters helped with the flowers. James's firehouse buddies promised to show up in uniform for photos. It was going to be simple, beautiful, perfect. Sarah hadn't thought about Derek in months. The restraining order was still in place, but he'd gone quiet. She assumed he'd moved on. She assumed wrong. What Sarah didn't know was that Derek had been planning, not moving on, planning. He tracked her social media through fake accounts. He knew about the engagement. He knew about the wedding date. He knew the venue. In the months leading up to the wedding, Derek became obsessed with the idea that Sarah had been stolen from him, that James had ruined his life, that the wedding was a personal attack. Friends later told police that Derek talked about Sarah constantly, that he seemed unable to accept that the relationship was over, that he mentioned more than once that if he couldn't have her, no one should. On the morning of June 18th, Sarah woke up excited, nervous but excited. She had breakfast with her sisters. They drank mimosas and did each other's makeup. James sent her a sweet text even though tradition said they shouldn't talk before the ceremony. Everything felt right. At the venue, guests started arriving around 4 in the afternoon. The weather was perfect, not too hot, a light breeze. Sarah's father kept tearing up during photos. Her mother kept fussing with her veil. It was exactly the kind of day Sarah had dreamed about. Derek arrived at the venue at 6:32 p.m. He parked 3 blocks away. He walked through a wooded area behind the property. He wore dark clothes. He carried a backpack. Inside the backpack was a handgun he'd purchased illegally 2 months earlier. He also carried a notebook filled with pages of handwritten notes, plans, timelines, diagrams of the venue layout. Later, investigators would describe it as a manifesto, a detailed record of his obsession. At 6:44 p.m., Derek sent a final text message to his brother. It said, "Tell Mom I'm sorry." Then he turned off his phone. He climbed over a low fence at the back of the property and moved toward the reception area. Guests were mingling, drinking, laughing. No one noticed him at first. He stayed in the shadows, watching, waiting. He saw Sarah standing near the gift table, radiant in her white dress, laughing at something James said. And that's when something inside him snapped. Derek walked into the open garden area at exactly 6:47 p.m. Several guests saw him immediately. One of James's friends, a fellow firefighter named Tony, recognized that something was wrong. The way Derek moved, the look on his face. Tony started walking toward him, not running, not wanting to cause panic, but moving with purpose. But before Tony could reach him, Derek pulled out the gun. Someone screamed. The music stopped. Chaos erupted. Sarah turned and saw him. For a split second, their eyes met. She saw the gun. She saw his face twisted with rage and pain, and she ran. James grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the building. Guests scattered in every direction. Derek fired 3 shots into the air. Not at anyone. Just into the air. Like he was trying to make a point. Like he was trying to make everyone stop and pay attention to him. Tony tackled him from the side before he could fire again. 2 other men, guests, piled on. They wrestled the gun away, held him down. Someone called 911. Police arrived within 4 minutes. Derek was arrested on the spot. He didn't resist, didn't say anything, just stared at the ground while they handcuffed him. Sarah was found inside the venue building, shaking, crying, holding on to James like her life depended on it. She wasn't physically hurt, but the trauma was immediate and overwhelming. The wedding was over. The reception never happened. Guests left in stunned silence. Sarah's father kept saying over and over, "How did he get in? How did he get in?" In the days after the attack, investigators dug into Derek's background. They discovered he'd been fired from his job 3 weeks before the wedding, that he'd stopped paying rent, that he'd essentially checked out of his normal life to focus entirely on this plan. They found his notebook, read his entries. Some were love letters to Sarah, some were hate-filled rants about James, some were step-by-step plans for what he intended to do at the wedding. The most chilling entry, dated June 10th, read, "If I can't give her a happy ending, I'll give her an ending she'll never forget." Derek was charged with multiple felonies, including attempted kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, stalking, and violation of a restraining order. His trial took place 8 months later, Sarah testified. She had to sit in a courtroom and recount every moment of their relationship, every warning sign she ignored, every time he hurt her, every sleepless night she spent afraid. Derek's defense attorney tried to paint him as mentally ill, not criminally responsible. But the notebook, the planning, the premeditation, it was all too clear. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Derek Cole was sentenced to 22 years in prison, but the sentencing didn't erase what happened. Sarah spent months in therapy. She had nightmares, panic attacks. She couldn't go back to the venue, couldn't look at wedding photos. For a while, she couldn't even think about having another ceremony. James stayed by her side through all of it. He never pressured her, never made her feel weak, just loved her through the trauma. About a year later, they had a small private ceremony at a courthouse. Just immediate family. No guests, no reception, no risk. It wasn't the wedding Sarah had dreamed of, but it was safe. And safety, she realized, was worth more than any fairy tale. Today, Sarah speaks publicly about domestic violence. She works with local organizations to educate young women about red flags in relationships. She shares her story not because it's easy, but because she knows how many people are living in situations like she was. She knows how hard it is to leave, how easy it is to make excuses, how love can blind you to danger. She tells audiences, "I thought I could fix him. I thought my love was enough." But you cannot love someone into being safe. You cannot love someone into respecting you. And if you're in a relationship where you're afraid, where you're controlled, where you're hurt, please, please leave, because I almost didn't get the chance. The question that haunts everyone who hears this story is simple. Could it have been prevented? Sarah had a restraining order. She'd reported Derek to police. She'd done everything right, and he still got to her. The answer is complicated. Our systems for protecting victims of domestic violence are deeply flawed. Restraining orders are pieces of paper. They can't stop a determined abuser. Better enforcement, better monitoring, better intervention, these things might help. But ultimately, the responsibility lies with the abuser. Derek made a choice. He chose obsession over acceptance. He chose violence over healing. He chose to destroy rather than let go. How do you feel about Sarah's story? Could you imagine being in her position, wanting to believe someone could change? What would you have done differently? And more importantly, do you know someone who might be living this reality right now? Someone who's making excuses for a partner's jealousy, control, or anger? Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is speak up, ask questions, offer support. Because stories like Sarah's don't have to end in violence. They can end in freedom, safety, and survival. But only if we're willing to see the signs and take them seriously. Justice was served in this case. Derek is behind bars, but Sarah will carry the weight of that day for the rest of her life. And that, perhaps, is the real tragedy. What can we do to make sure their voices are heard? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Dark Motive Cases for more true crime stories that matter. Stories that remind us why truth and justice are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Emma Collins didn't die in vain. Her courage exposed a predator hiding behind a robe and a gavel. Let's make sure her legacy is a system that actually protects the vulnerable instead of empowering their abusers.